If you have ever navigated pumping through an illness, pumping while hospitalized, pumping milk for a baby who has been hospitalized, if you have ever navigated pumping milk while at work when you didn't really have a great pumping spot, or if you were in the service industry and you have had to navigate pumping for an employer who did not follow the laws, this is the show for you. And if you have not navigated these things, it's also the show for you because it's so important for us to listen to the experiences of others and know what it's been like for them so that we can make pumping and breastfeeding better for everyone. We have to normalize these experiences and do better. So I'm so happy to introduce to you this episode of the Milk Making Minutes. Hi, Griselda. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to hear your baby feeding stories. But
Oh
before
my
we jump
gosh.
into that, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and your family.
My name is Griselda Villa, and then I do have two boys. I have a 6-year-old named Isaac, and I have an 8-year-old named Matthew.
So before you were having kids yourself, what
hmm
was your exposure to breastfeeding and baby feeding?
Zero.
Okay.
Zero. I had been with my husband. We're going to be 20 years together this year. And I just wasn't sure if I wanted kids. And then the job situation was also a big factor. So
Mm,
by the time I had my kids, everybody else around me had grown kids.
mhm.
So it's not something my mom did or we talked about first generation here. Clueless, honestly. The only time I do remember is I remember as a little girl, like some family member coming over and feeding her baby. And I remember I recall that because it was very strange to me. But I was like a teeny baby, maybe 5, something like
Oh,
that.
wow.
So I didn't
Uh-huh.
have a clue, but I do remember trying to do that with my doll.
Oh, so sweet. Yeah.
I tried.
Um, you
Mhm.
said you're first generation here, meaning here in
In the
the
States,
US?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and where are your parents from?
My parents are from Mexico.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and they came here and created this wonderful life for 5 girls.
Criselda's mom is a Mexican immigrant and a mother of 5 who birthed all of her children in the United States. I asked her what she knew about her mom's baby feeding experiences, and this is what she told me.
We still have it so much better because she said nobody talked to her about anything. And I can imagine it was probably so much harder for her with the language barrier and just those
Mm,
times that she
yes.
would literally leak so much and she would go to the bathroom and just squeeze the milk out into the sink.
I have spent, I would say, a good amount of time in places where I did not speak the language or was not a native speaker
hmm
of the language. And I cannot imagine birthing babies and trying to navigate a medical system somewhere where
Yes.
I was not able to communicate
hmm
in my native language, even if I was proficient, trying to get the information because there is so much you're trying to learn.
Yes.
So, going back to your mom's situation, birthing babies, of course, you're just going to do what people are handing you. Um,
hmm
and the thought of squeezing her milk into the sink just to get relief.
Yes. Yes. I couldn't
What
believe
an
it
image.
when she told me. I
Yeah.
just could not believe it.
Even though Criselda did not know many people who had breastfed and it was not done in her family, she knew it was what was best for her baby and she knew she wanted to try. So you're pregnant and you decided, I don't know what it's going to be like for me, but I'm going to try.
Yes.
Was there anything that you did to prepare or to try to educate yourself about breastfeeding and
No,
breast
believe it or not, no. I
milk?
just thought it was like gonna be like
Yeah.
I just really didn't think about it. I was like, you just put your kid on there and let, it happen. But I didn't, and luckily I was blessed with that situation, but it wasn't the same for my second.
Griselda's first son was delivered vaginally at the hospital after being induced due to gestational diabetes. She was surprised that the nurses immediately brought her baby to her breast after the delivery. Within the first couple of days, she was concerned he was not getting enough breast milk, so the nursing staff offered a prepared 2-ounce bottle of formula. But her baby was up all night crying after that, and she didn't offer him formula again. She felt like the nursing staff only educated her about milk supply and the size of her baby's stomach when she explicitly asked, but the information was not given unless she initiated the questions.
I didn't really have someone tell me if you just want to breastfeed, it's just better. No, I didn't have that. And
Yeah.
that was just something from me.
On what day did they provide that formula
The
bottle?
second day, like when we were getting discharged.
Were you at that time worried about his intake? Were they worried about
Yes.
his
Yes.
weight?
I
How
was
did that get
worried
into
about not having milk.
okay. So you were worried about not having milk and you brought that up to them and they said you could give him a bottle.
Yeah.
Is that how it went? Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. Were there any board certified lactation consultants, IBCLCs at the hospital?
I don't think so because honestly, it was just the nurses. No.
So if somebody had come to you and said, this is how milk supply works,
Yeah.
this is the normal for when mature milk comes in, this is how big the baby's tummy is, this
Mhm.
is what the colostrum does, this is what you should be looking out for.
Yes. They did tell me that when I asked,
Okay.
but it wasn't like,
Uh-huh.
um,
Automatically given to you.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I asked because I was concerned.
Uh-huh.
I do remember I had to go in to see the chronologist for the diabetes because they
Oh,
were
okay.
really on top of you have to drop the weight, you have to, so that because it's once you get it with gestational, it's more than likely that you will be able to get it. It's like a sign that you'll get it after birth.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in a week in, and I remember because I had called my mom to watch my son while I went to this appointment, and you get the tingling because it was already I was already in a week's time already. When I was supposed when you start lactating and you just feel it.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was, and I found that really strange because that was like the first time I felt that because I had been with him the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't
When
know anything about that either. Just found that on my own.
right. Yeah. Oh no, what's happening right now?
Yes, yes, it was the
Yeah.
strangest and weirdest thing. Obviously, I figured it out, but it was very strange because I wasn't gone that long.
Griselda compared her earliest feeding moments with her first to those of her second, since I had an inkling that it was much harder with her second baby. She tells a story of an epidural delivered incorrectly, which caused neurological problems for her, causing what she described as an imbalance and which landed her in the ICU for a week after the delivery of her baby. Her son was also not breathing properly and was also being cared for in the ICU. No one at the hospital ever attributed his health issues to the botched epidural, but Griselda and her husband believed that to be the case. Because she was struggling medically, this meant she only had brief moments of skin to skin before her son was whisked away. He was fed bottles of formula without her consent.
I was screwed up and he was not breathing correctly. They gave him a bottle
Mm-hmm.
immediately. They gave him a bottle uh,
Without your
without like my consent. They
because
just
you couldn't consent.
they're incubating
Of
him. Yeah, I mean,
course.
putting in,
Yeah.
and then I don't know anything about myself. So they gave him the bottle.
Okay.
Because also, and at that point, I feel like I felt like I just didn't have a choice because I wanted him to eat.
Right.
And then if he
Yeah.
was struggling to breathe, it was like when they suckle you, I think it's a little bit more work for them. And he got used to it. And I did pump there while I was there. The nurse was encouraging. She would come in and wake me up to feed him. But honestly, I was so out of it. I just remember them coming to get me trying to do it. And I
You
really tried.
trying to pump or trying to
Breastfeed and pump.
oh, Griselda had given birth at a local community hospital and was still there trying to manage her own health while simultaneously worrying about her baby's health. After a week, it was determined that she needed a third epidural to improve her health outcomes so she could be released. Once that happened, she finally felt better and her son was transferred to an ICU in a larger county hospital.
So I got released from there, but my son did get transferred to the other hospital in the ICU.
Okay, and how long was he in the ICU?
About 10 days.
Wow. And did they have somebody knowledgeable about breastfeeding there
Yes,
that could
they
provide
did there. Yeah, and they were they had their own room. They gave me like a bunch of stuff, but I just wasn't producing.
you? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was very difficult. And I tried because I think I had this guilt. How can I not give him when I gave like my first son?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it went really well for me on the first one with the breastfeeding until I went to work. But
Right.
because I was blessed enough to take the time off and it was just on demand. And I was like, honestly, like I had a lot of milk and I just didn't pump because I didn't have to. I was with him all the time. And I did start like when I knew I was going to work, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not something I enjoyed
No, right.
doing. And to be honest, I had a hard time too with him because he didn't want the bottle, even if it was the breast milk.
Right. Yeah, with your first.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the second one, I really tried it. I actually did it for 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Exclusively pumping or trying to pump for three
Pump,
months?
yes. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was just honestly with a 1.5-year old,
Yeah.
him, the newborn, and I don't have any help. Like it's by myself.
Right.
Zero. Like no support, like from
Mm-hmm.
anybody. Because everybody works and they have their own families, and my mom is just a little too old.
Right. Yeah,
It was just too much for me.
of course.
I did make the effort and I went to my doctor and I did see a lactation specialist.
Mm-hmm. And we know that stress hormones interfere with milk making and milk releasing hormones.
Wow.
So when you're in high stress situation, like you were worried about your own health. You were worried about the health of your newborn baby. You had a toddler at home that you were worried about, I'm sure.
Yes.
Being separated from his mom for so long and his life is being turned upside down. And that's a lot to have to contend with.
Yeah.
And you're right that bodies don't respond to pumps in the same way that babies do. And for some people, it's totally fine, but it's not for everybody.
It didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work for
Yeah.
me. I just, yeah, it always amazes me when I do hear those stories about the people that pump so much. And I was like, that's got to be like your full-time job because I just, and I literally would sit there and barely get 2 ounces.
Did you have insurance coverage for your pump or did you pay out of pocket?
I had insurance. I had insurance through my husband. I
Yeah.
hated it. I hated it with a
Yeah.
passion. I'm not gonna
I hear
lie.
that from so many people. And so, did your younger son have health issues that extended beyond?
No, thank God. Once we went to the ICU, they did like extensive tests, and basically he just needed to catch up because when I got induced, I got induced a week or two early because
Mhm.
of the gestational diabetes. So I think he just needed to basically catch up to.
Okay.
He needed the week.
And when did you get induced with your first? Was it the same time frame or was it a little later?
The same time frame. The same.
Okay.
Yeah,
So then with your second, you said you continued to try to pump some amount of breast milk
I did.
for about 2 months.
3.
3 months. 3 months. Okay, I'm
3
not going to
months.
short you that month because that is a lot of days.
Yeah, I'm like 3 months. I gave it my all.
Right. What point did you realize this is causing me more distress than it is making our lives better?
I was very stressed period, from
Mhm.
just the whole
Yeah.
experience. And then I think I was even more stressed after. Now I had a 1.5 year old, a newborn, that I was like constantly, I just wanted to make sure he was okay, and that, and he was a small baby. So
Mhm.
he wasn't gaining weight like my first son was, a little chunky monkey, you know?
Mhm.
And I tried like everything. I went to the doctor a couple times, and I saw this lactation specialist, like I told you. And I do remember she, at the, I think the third time that I went, she's like, it's not, it's not the end of the world if you can't do it. She's like, a lot of people give babies their formula and they're fine. You can, she's, I did it with my kids, and it'll be okay.
So
You
were you how much at this point, how much formula and how much breast milk? What was the breakdown? Do you know? Was it mainly
50-50.
formula?
Yeah. I was doing like
50.
a 50-50, but
Okay.
because I just wasn't producing. And also I knew that I was going to go back to work, and I was going to go back to work a little sooner, because it was like around the holidays, how when the service industry, you're like busy.
Yes.
I had my son, the second one, in August. They did ask me like, when do you plan? I go, so I kind of timed it. I was like, I'll do it right before it starts getting busy,
Mm.
which is kind of like mid-October. So I was also, because I had such a hard time with when I went to work with my first son, I wanted to try to do that 50-50 too, so it wouldn't be as hard.
I started the Milk Making Minutes because I'm passionate about supporting breastfeeding people. But more importantly, I knew that hearing real people tell real stories would benefit both the storytellers and the listeners. I had this idea for 3 years before I launched. I asked so many people how I should begin, and Anchor came up repeatedly as the easiest way to launch a podcast. And I have not been disappointed. If you are passionate about a topic and have wanted to start a podcast, you can use Anchor to record and distribute your podcast. It's easy to use. You can use the editing tools right from the platform. You can distribute your podcast episodes seamlessly to listening platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts right from Anchor. And the best part is, it's free. And the tech support has been great too. Go to anchor.fm or download the app right to your phone to get started on your great podcast idea. Yeah.
And it just so happened that I just wasn't producing
Were you also trying to latch him ever at the breast, or by that
all the time, but he just
okay,
wasn't.
he
That
just
was,
w
I think that's what killed me, and I cried a lot. It just,
Mhm.
it hurt my
Did
soul.
did people understand your sadness and disappointment and grief over that?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, so you felt alone.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can't see me, Griselda. I'm kinda tearing up too because I totally get that feeling of,
I'm so
you
sorry. I'm
know
like,
No.
I've heard you, plenty about it. You try not to, but it just,
No, of
it
course.
made me feel bad.
Yeah.
It's a connection. It's
Yeah.
just, for me, that's what it was.
Mhm.
And I felt that he wasn't connecting with me, and I felt I was getting cheated, and so was he.
Yeah, and there's some shame that can happen where people think that guilt comes from a pressure, an external pressure to breastfeed. But for me, when I had to make, I was able to breastfeed both of my kids for several years, but I did have to supplement with formula with my first when I went back to work as well
Yeah.
because my body didn't respond to the pump. And for me, it was not an external pressure. It really just was the grief of a lost experience.
So I think that's why it chokes me up so bad, because
Yeah.
I do remember that desperation feeling, and that feeling of like failure and loneliness, because you really couldn't talk to people, because it's true, they're like, and especially after what I had been through with him, they're like, oh, but he's fine, he's healthy. And even this lactation nurse, like I explained to you, how she broke it down to me, and I also felt maybe in a way she was like just give it up. It's going to be all right. He'll still be fine, is basically what she told me. But I think what really did it for me was when I had to go back to work. I was just struggling so much.
Griselda has always worked as a server in high end restaurants. She had been with her previous employer for 10 years before she got pregnant, but knew the environment was too grueling for life as a mom. When her son was 8 months old, she began looking for work and learned about a new restaurant. And as is usually the case in the restaurant business, she was hired to work based on the recommendation of a friend. She felt clueless about what she should be asking from her new manager as a pumping mom and did not set any expectations about pumping breaks. As you can imagine, it was really hard when she first went back. As you listen, think about your first moments back in a working environment once you became a mom. So you go off to work, you have your 8 month baby. Who was watching your baby while you were at work?
My husband and I, and we still do it that way. So basically, he's in the service industry too, but in a different way. He is a truck driver. So basically, he delivers the produce and stuff to these restaurants during the
Okay.
day. So he leaves like crack of dawn, 4 in the morning.
Okay.
We do see each other in between because he'll get off early sometimes. So the way we manage is he works in the day and then I would work in the evening. And
Okay. Got
so
it.
I watch the baby in the day and then he'll watch the baby in the evening.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
So you go off to work. Did you take your pump on the first day? What did you
I
do?
did not.
Oh, no.
No, not a clue. Like you would think for my age that I would have some type of knowledge, but no,
What did you leave for your baby?
I pumped. So
Okay. So you pumped. You had enough for
I
baby
had a
on the.
lot. Yes.
Okay. Had you been pumping leading up to it? Did you have a
Yes,
staff?
I
Okay.
sure was because I knew he's going to need milk.
So
But
you thought, I'll have this stash and baby's
mhm,
just going to use the stash that I
mhm.
have. And I'm
Yes.
an overproducer, so I'm always just going to have enough milk.
Yes.
That was your idea.
Mhm.
So you get to work on your first day. How many hours was this first shift?
It was like 8 hours.
8 hour shift with no
Mhm.
pump. How did that work out for you?
Terrible, terrible. I got engorged. I was in pain. It was bad.
Yeah.
Um,
You think about your mom expressing milk into the sink.
I did not because I was too busy.
Yeah.
I was too busy trying to make sure I did everything right. The pressures of when you got a new
Yeah.
job.
And you're also almost a new person. For me, I felt like I was a new person once I became a mom. You're not the same person you were when
No,
you
you're
were
not. You're
before.
not.
So you
Yeah.
have more things on your mind than before.
Yeah. And I felt the pressure of making this good impression and having this new job and just the pressure of everything like new.
Mhm. Yeah,
Readjusting.
yeah. So you worked that first shift, and
Clueless.
yeah, what happened after that? What
Then
did you
after
do?
that, obviously I brought my pump.
Mm-hmm.
I basically just told the other person I was working with, listen, can you cover me for 15 minutes because I need to go pump, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
It was never a discussion you had with like your manager or
No,
anything. You
no,
just would always work it out. And were the other people understanding?
not the girl that I was working with. She wasn't very nice, but everybody else was. Unfortunately, she's the one that I was working with in this particular area. But I just feel like if you just don't get it, you don't get it.
There's
Like,
no way to know
yeah,
unless you
yeah, you don't get it.
find
But the other people were very supportive, you know.
were there any other parents who had experience with this? Who
There happened to be a girl there who had just had a baby, and
Mm,
there was and one that and she was pregnant too with kind of like me, real like she was pregnant with her second. She understood it, and so what I was doing is really like sneaking off, like trying to find that gap where it slowed down and asking, can you please cover me for 15 minutes? But 15 minutes honestly didn't cut it because the bathroom, which the employee bathroom, is always like, it was downstairs. So I had to travel downstairs where it
Right.
was like a locker room. I had to find a plug because of this Medela and no privacy. So I would literally grab like the little covers that you use when you breastfeed, when you go out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for
Mm-hmm.
privacy. By the time I like unbuckled everything, put that in, and just try to with that pressure. Oh my god! Like I gotta go back up. I've been gone, but and people coming in and out, like this dirty bathroom. Look, I didn't even feel, and in the middle, just sitting there in the middle with everybody just coming in and out.
Yeah, that is not conducive to making a lot of milk.
Yes, that's how like I was doing it. And I do remember one time I was down there sitting in this chair because it, and when I look back at it, I think it was just the pressure of I had just got this new job and I didn't want to cause any ruffles, or but it's really
Mhm.
dumb to in retrospect when I think about it. I do remember passing by the signs where they have like your rights.
Every week, I talk to people who are looking for options to pump milk for their babies who work in the service industry. They are all looking for easy options to be able to extract milk that do not involve sitting in a private area that has an outlet that is not a bathroom. These people know the laws in their state, but they're not able to advocate for themselves because they have employers that are not following the laws in their state. Griselda tells this story of a manager coming to find her while she was pumping milk in a public area meant for employees on their breaks.
So I
Right.
remember her opening it and just walking right back out. Like she saw me. And then when I realized later when I went back up, is they started getting busy and she was looking for me and she went down there and then realized that I was pumping. So she really
Mm,
couldn't say she didn't say anything to me, but her expression said it all. So it was very uncomfortable. And then finally there was this bartender and I was telling him and he's, you know what, Chris? He goes, there is a private bathroom upstairs, which I had no idea about. And he goes, you can go over there and just be in private by yourself. And then that was a relief because that was like one of those big single bathrooms and I was alone. It was clean,
mm,
but still I wasn't asking. I was just making it happen. And
right.
the pressure of that was a lot.
In addition to her pumping struggles at work, Griselda's baby was refusing the bottle at home. Her husband would call her with a screaming baby in the background. If it wasn't for her fellow mom coworker who grabbed her hands, looked her in the eyes, and told her her husband and baby would figure out how to make it work together, she would have walked out. Is there a time in your breastfeeding or pumping journey when someone gave you just the right encouragement to make it through the hardest moment? If you are currently pregnant or breastfeeding, think of who you may need to lean on to say just the right thing at just the right moment when the going gets tough. You may also need to think about who you're not going to mention your struggles to, because you know they'll say the wrong thing. Griselda was only able to manage to pump once during an 8-hour shift, and her baby would hold out and wait for her until she got home when they would reconnect and breastfeed upon reuniting.
Yeah, so it was, and my husband was persistent on trying him to get the bottle. So he
Mm.
finally did. I don't even
Oh,
remember when it was. And he
uh-huh.
was so excited about it. He called me, he left me
Oh,
messages, he sent me pictures.
uh-huh.
Just the joy for both of us.
Sure. I'm sure that had to have been so stressful for him.
Yeah.
And so good of that coworker of yours to
Oh,
grab your hands.
I will never forget it.
Yeah. And say he will figure it out.
Yes, she
Because
grabbed both of
he
my
can do it.
hands, like
Yeah.
literally grabbed my both of my hands, stood in front of me, looked me in my eyes, and just said to me, "No,
Mhm.
he will figure it out. It's going
Mhm.
to be okay." Because
Right.
she just saw me in desperation,
Mhm.
and I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did your managers have like an office or anything that they did ordering
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, of
or
course, yeah, and it
yeah.
was in the basement as well as where the bathroom was and everything else, the dishwashing, the kitchen. This wasn't, it was like, it was connected to a hotel. So everything was, it was a large scale. So the
Yeah,
downstairs was basically where operations went. And then the restaurant was on the first floor.
yeah. I ask because I don't know what Illinois' state breastfeeding laws are. Most state breastfeeding laws say that employers that have over a certain number of employees must provide a pumping space that has an
Yes.
outlet
Yes. But
that is not
I didn't
a
know.
bathroom. That
I,
is not a bathroom.
I didn't know.
Right. And some people I'll tell that to who are in the service industry, and they'll be like, yeah, so what? I'm not talking to my manager about this because they're a jerk or because they
It's
don't care or
true.
because they don't get it.
They don't get it. They just don't get it. And
And
it's,
some people will
mhm.
say, "Huh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll ask my manager if I can use their office." That's why I bring that up because I'll say, "Does your manager have an office? Do you think you could use it?" And sometimes they're like, "Yes, my manager's really nice, and I think if I asked, I could use their office."
Yeah. You know what?
So,
This office was one of those where it was a multi office where so many people were
mm,
in it.
okay.
It wasn't like a single use office for
Mhm.
one manager. It was like all the managers. So at any given time, there'd be three, four people in there. So I don't
Right,
think it was
right.
something that I can just, oh,
Take
I'm
over.
stopping everyone's work so that I can go pump. But honestly, I think this was like one of the, because I had been at the other place, which was so anti child and nobody really had kids over there. This was the first place, which was another thing that I had loved initially, that there was actually people there that had kids
Mhm.
working in this place. And I was like, wow. I remember telling the manager that interviewed me that I had never worked at a place where I was with people that had kids and families. And and when I think about it, I was like, how silly of me to think this when it's part of life. It's part of life
Mhm.
because that industry is so demanding. And I think everyone has like different experiences just depending on the place, but for the most part I do feel that a lot of the situations with the service industry are real and closer to my story.
Yes, I believe you because I hear it. I hear quick snippets of it, not the full story, but I hear people just say, I can't plug in, so I need a pump that has at least a battery, things like that. And I know that this is real, that it happens over and over again. And what we need to see happen is when people build restaurants, the same way that employers of other places, when they're building their buildings, they're required to think about where is our pumping space going to be for all the families. That needs to start happening in restaurant spaces
Yeah.
too, so that people don't have to drop out of the workforce if they enjoy working in the service
And
industry.
that's why I so get like, now during the past couple of years we've had a lot of like changes in, even before this pandemic. I think they have had all these movements, one of them being the service industry too. But I get why people don't want to go back to work to
Mhm,
these jobs.
mhm.
Luckily, now I'm like so blessed and thankful for where I am. They are beyond supportive, something I've never experienced in my life.
Mm.
And it's a special thing.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's
It makes a huge impact when people are supportive of working families because we have to take care of our families. That has to be our priority.
it's unbelievable and it gets me emotional because I'm like, I've never experienced it until,
Mm.
and I'm older now, you know what I mean? It's, oh my god. Thank you God.
Yeah, yeah, that's so amazing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is so amazing.
That's why I agreed to do this, because listening to all of the other experiences of the people you've had on your podcast, it's just such a positive interaction with all the mamas that are going through different things. Everybody's experience is different, but to know that they're not alone and that there
Yes.
are options. I wish I would have. heard some of these stories before then.
I know, that's the hope. That's the hope. So I thank you so much for sharing your stories,
Yeah.
and I'm so excited to get this out to people who will relate to it so much or who are in the service industry and are like, okay, that's what it was like for her. I need to start planning ahead and thinking about how I can set
Yes.
it up to be less stressed about this
And know
situation.
their rights, and not be afraid of, it's just, it is life, it's
Yeah.
part of life. And maybe if there's something that I would say about to the service industry people, is make yourself first and a priority. And I know that everyone has to work for whatever you need, your livelihood, but maybe that's just not the place for you.
Mm,
And
yeah.
there are, especially now that there have been, it's easier said than done, but it is possible. And I'm proof of that.
Yeah.
I'm proof of that because it's happened to me. And I think it's just knowledge is power.
Do you want to share where you work now that's so amazing and supportive?
Yeah, sure. I work at Chef Special Cocktail in Chicago, and I love them so much. They've been great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I so appreciate
Thank
this.
you too. Thank you too. Thank you for all that you're doing. I think it's amazing, just amazing.
I'm so thankful to Griselda for sharing her story here on the Milk Making Minutes. It's one that highlights a few key things that we all need to keep in mind. One, Griselda's story is one that highlights how important it is to, one, ask for and receive support from a lactation specialist in the hospital. If it's not offered, ask for it. If it's not available from a lactation consultant, hire a private one. Sometimes you're going to get varying advice from nurses in the hospital because they aren't lactation specialists. So they're giving you advice in much the same way that your mom friends are giving you advice. Number two, know your rights when it comes to being a breastfeeding employee and advocate for yourself. And number three, if you are an employer, please set up your work environment so that breastfeeding moms can be successful. Make sure that you're following at least the law, and then also knowing that the law doesn't always actually make it so that breastfeeding moms can be successful in their breastfeeding journeys. You might actually have to go above and beyond what the letter of the law says. If you would like to keep the conversation going about this story or any other, or if you would like to get support from other breastfeeding moms or from me, join the Milk Making Minutes Keep the Conversation Going group, and I would love if you would rate and review the Milk Making Minutes on your favorite podcasting app. That helps others find the show.